Hi guys. Today we're going to do module 4, lesson 10. And in this lesson, we are going to model and determine all possible outcomes of a simple event and describe the likelihood of the outcomes occurring. So we're talking about probability. So if something is likely to happen, that means it most likely will happen. If something is unlikely to happen, it's not very possible that it would. And then if something is impossible, that means it can't happen at all. And if something is certain, that means it absolutely will happen. So in your heads, think about events that are certain, likely, unlikely, and impossible. So one event that I like to think about is the sun rising. Which of those 4 things would the sun rising be? Is that certain? Is it likely? Is it unlikely? Or is it impossible? Think about an event that is impossible. What is an event that is impossible? I think an event that is impossible would be maybe like Godzilla would take over the city of Newport News. That's probably an impossible event. Okay, so we're going to look at some different examples of events that can happen or occur, and we're going to talk about the likelihood or the possible outcomes of these events. Okay, so here's our first one. Jason and Maria are playing a game where they spin a spinner, and this is what their spinner looks like. Describe the spinner that Jason and Maria are using in this game. What do you notice? Well, I noticed that the spinner has 4 sections. There are triangles in 2 of the 4 sections. I noticed that there's a hexagon in one of the sections and a square in the other section. Is the spinner more likely to land on one section or another? Why or why not? This spinner is not likely to land or is not more likely to land on one of these sections because all of the sections are the same. They are all 1/4 of our total circle. They're all the same size and they take up the same amount of space. So what are all of the possible outcomes of spinning the spinner? So the event is spinning the spinner, and the outcomes are what our answer or what our result could be when we spin our spinner. So our possible outcomes would be triangle, hexagon, and square. So we have 3 possible outcomes, but there's 4 sections. Why do you think that is? So I noticed that 2 of the sections have the same outcome. Is it more likely that we would get that outcome than one of the other outcomes? Think about it. Is it more likely that we would spin a triangle than a square or a hexagon? Yes, it is. It is more likely that we would spin a triangle because there are 2 out of 4, whereas with the square, it's 1 out of 4 pieces, and the hexagon is also 1 out of 4 chance that we would spin that. So you are most likely to spin a triangle because it takes up half or 2 out of the 4 pieces. Okay, let's talk about equally likely. The concept of equally likely it would be the same chance of spinning both of those outcomes. So are there any outcomes that are equally likely that we could spin? Well, it's equally likely that we could spin the hexagon or the square because they both have the same amount of chances out of 4 that we could spin them. They both have 1 out of 4 chances. Okay, what is an outcome that is impossible for us to spin? You could really say any answer. Okay, a trapezoid would be impossible. A turtle would be impossible. A circle would be impossible. The color green would be impossible because none of those are on our spinner. What is an outcome that is certain? So a certain outcome would be one where we could get that outcome if we hit any of these sections. So we could say that it is certain that we would spin a shape, right? Because we have a shape in all of these sections. It is certain that we would spin a polygon. Okay, so we can agree that spinning a triangle is most likely. What outcome is least likely? So the outcomes that are least likely would be spinning a hexagon or spinning a square, and they're both less likely to be spun than a triangle. Okay, let's look at the next spinner. Here's our next spinner. A carnival game might use this spinner. What's different about this spinner than our first spinner? In this spinner, there are 3 possible outcomes. Are all of 3 of these outcomes equal sizes? Is it the same chance that we would get each of these outcomes? No, because they're all different sizes. What are the possible outcomes for this spinner? Okay, we have win, we could spin lose, or we could spin again. 3 possible outcomes. Which outcome is most likely? We can see that lose is most likely because it takes up the most space on our spinner. Which outcome is least likely? The least likely outcome would be spinning win because it takes up the smallest amount of space. Are any of these outcomes equally likely? None of these outcomes are equally likely because they all take up different amounts of space and they are all different sizes. What is an outcome that is impossible? I would say an impossible spin could be landing on the color yellow or landing on jump up and down. If you saw this game at a carnival, would you want to play it? Okay, let's look at our next example. Here we have a bunch of letter tiles. If all of these tiles are placed in the bag, let's think about what the number of let's think about our possible outcomes. Okay, so imagine all of these tiles are placed in a bag. Then we're going to draw one without looking at it. What are the possible outcomes that we can pull out of the bag? So we can pull an M would be an outcome, an A, a T, an H, an E, an I, a C, and an S. Which letters are the most likely to be drawn and why? So M is likely to be drawn or more likely to be drawn because there are two of them. Another one would be A and T because there's two options in the bag as opposed to only one. Which letters are least likely to be drawn? We have T, H, E, I, C, and S. Oh, T is not one. H, E, I, C, S. Because there are only one of each of those letters. What would be an impossible outcome? An impossible outcome would be drawing the letter Q. What about a certain outcome? We could say a certain outcome could be drawing a lowercase letter. A certain outcome could be drawing a letter. A certain outcome could be drawing a letter in the word mathematics. Okay, so this ends our lesson. You are going to go ahead and work on your problem set and see if you can't recall the information that we talked about in our lesson.